Our 11th anniversary is coming up, and my wife Jenny and I have been eagerly looking forward to celebrating it this upcoming Saturday. Being business partners and constantly on the road together, we can indeed create tension in our relationship, and I've felt that lately we've been growing apart. It was my idea to return to Chicago for our anniversary. I prayed that this would inject some spark back into our marriage. The plan was to return to the same club where I proposed to her. First, I checked to make sure it was still there and was thrilled to learn that not only was it still there, but it was still owned by the same people and hadn't changed much. I told Jenny that I wanted to invite her there for dinner and dancing. She enthusiastically accepted my invitation with the excitement of a little girl on Christmas. It felt as if we were reliving that special night more than 10 years ago. It seemed like not so many years had passed. Back then, I would take on any job, and it took me 3 months to save up for that night. My dad gave me money for the rain, but I didn't have the courage to ask him for more, so I saved. I wanted everything to be perfect. After dinner and a few romantic dances, I led Jenny to the back terrace, from which there was a view of the Chicago River. The bright city lights flickered and danced on the water's surface, stubbornly refusing to be subdued as the current tried to push them into Lake Michigan. I couldn't dream of a more beautiful night when I got down on one knee and asked her to spend the rest of her life with me. I've never regretted that night since. While Jenny was still getting ready, I slipped out of the house and ran to the local flower shop for a bouquet of flowers. When I returned, I approached the door and knocked, just like many years ago. She was pleasantly surprised and invited me in with a wide smile. Of course, being a woman, she still had to fuss for 15 minutes, but then we left, as if in the good old days. My source was right, the place hadn't changed. It was almost like stepping back into the past when the waiter escorted us to our table. Over dinner, we talked about how good it felt to return to Chicago. We both grew up here, went to school here, met here, and got married here, but because of our business, we traveled a lot, and this was our first return in many years. After dinner, we moved to the lounge and sat at a table near the dance floor. Before, there were live bands, but now they had a DJ playing a variety of tunes from big band to the latest rock and roll. I waited for him to play something slow and romantic, and then I invited Jenny to dance. I held her close as we glided across the floor, her head comfortably resting on my shoulder. For the next hour, we didn't leave the dance floor, but eventually, we both needed a break. We returned to our table just a few minutes later when a man approached us. He had a confident, pleasant appearance that women liked, and his well-built physique was evident even through his clothes. Jenny Johnson?" he asked, obviously knowing her even before she got married. Jenny looked up at him. Dennis Blake. "Yes, this is Jenny, but she's no longer a Johnson." "My goodness," she said, standing up and giving him a tight hug. "It's been so many years, how have you been?" she exclaimed loudly enough for some people at nearby tables to hear. I noticed a woman at one table straining her ears, hoping to catch some gossip for her treasure trove of rumors. "Well, I think the last time I saw you was about a year after we finished high school," he replied as they hugged again. For a moment, it seemed like she almost forgot about my presence. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Jenny said, looking at me and still speaking excitedly. "This is my husband, Walt." I started to rise from my seat and extended my hand, but all he did was glance in my direction with a slight nod before looking back at my lovely wife. "Would you mind if I join you?" he asked Jenny, starting to sit down. "No, not at all. We have so much to catch up on," she said to him, not even glancing my way. To say I looked a little hurt would be an understatement, especially when they both monopolized the conversation. He told her he had left the stage shortly after they last saw each other and only returned sporadically for business. He mentioned that since he left early in the morning, fate must have led him to stop for a beer before heading back to the motel. He spotted her on the dance floor, but in the dim light, he wasn't sure if it was her. So he waited until we sat down and was sure before approaching. I tried to appear understanding and acted content, calmly leaning back in my chair and listening as they both talked about old times. He told Jenny how great she looked and that she hadn't changed a bit in 12 years. My lovely wife devoured his words. Among everyone else, my ears perked up when the conversation turned to sex. They seemed like old friends, now laughing at their naivety and inexperience. I felt cold stares at the back of my head when he told her, right in front of me, that he should never have left without taking her with him. He said he got married, but it only made him realize that he left the woman he truly loved in Chicago. I'm sure some people around us saw the anger on my face when I considered ending the conversation and leaving with my wife, but it was precisely then, without even looking at me for approval, that he invited her to dance. She acted as if I weren't even there when she reached out her hand for him to take and led her. I'm sure it wasn't hard to notice that I was seething with anger when they both stepped onto the floor. The man at the neighboring table commented on their behavior. Despite all the reminiscing and laughter they shared, neither Dennis nor my wife seemed very calm in their conversation. I watched as he took her by the hands and started a slow dance. At first, the distance between them was quite decent, but as time passed, it became less and less. I sat, sipping my beer and drumming my fingers, as they continued to dance from one slow song to another. I could hear more whispers from the surrounding tables. I felt it was time. I approached them and patted Dennis warmly on the shoulder. "Can I join in and dance with my wife?" I said somewhat sarcastically. Neither he nor my wife looked very pleased when I took his place. "Hey, remember me, your husband?" I asked sharply. "What's going on? Why are you letting this guy monopolize our time together on our anniversary?" I wasn't speaking particularly loudly, but not in a whisper either. I knew some of the people dancing around us could hear me. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry," she apologized. "It's just so nice to see Dennis again. I'm sure you've heard. He was the guy who got my cherry," she said with a smile and a giggle. "Yes, I heard. I think everyone knows by now. If they didn't hear the conversation, they can tell by how you're acting. I think he's trying to relive that night. His intentions are dishonest, Jenny. I want you to put an end to this," I said. "Walt, please stop, don't be like this. He's just an old friend I haven't seen in many years. Please don't ruin this evening for me," she pleaded. "Well, he certainly ruined everything for me," I told her. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but I'll fix everything, I promise," she said. At that moment, the song ended, and I felt someone patting me on the shoulder. That rascal's son had returned. "Come on, buddy, we haven't seen each other in 12 years. Be a good guy and give us a little time to catch up," he said loudly enough for the people around to hear. I saw a woman with an open mouth, clearly not believing this guy's audacious behavior. The wife looked into my eyes. "Please, dear, we haven't seen each other in so long, and he's leaving in the morning." I saw a look of disgust on one guy's face and knew he considered me weak when I softened and returned Jenny to her former lover. I felt the stares of others in the room watching me as I sneaked back to our table and ordered another beer. You might think they would surely return to the table when the DJ started playing fast songs, but no, they kept laughing and flirting with each other as Jenny shook her hips, seemingly unconcerned about the growing number of people noticing my increasingly awkward situation. When the next slow song played, Jenny hugged Dennis around the neck and, closing her eyes, rested her head on his chest. His hands went straight to her buttocks. Some couples dancing nearby looked at me, probably wondering why I allowed this to continue. That's it, I didn't mutter to myself anymore, but as soon as I started to get up from my seat, the song ended, and Dennis headed towards the men's restroom. Jenny returned to the table. "Phew," she said, a little embarrassed. "These fast songs wore me out." "Yeah, I could say that. You were hanging on your hero, it was awkward. Are you ready to go home?" I asked teasingly. She had a strange look when she sat down. "Darling, you know I love you, right?" Everyone around us could see that I didn't like how the conversation was going. "I hope so, because I love you," I reassured her. "I know, dear, and I pray that you love me enough to understand what I'm about to say. Darling, when Dennis comes out of the men's restroom, we're leaving with him. He'll drop me off at the airport tomorrow morning on his way." No one could believe what they heard. She wasn't even discreet about it. I glanced around some of the surrounding tables and realized that now everyone was tuned in to our family problems. "Damn it, it's not gonna happen," I roared. Hell, everyone knew anyway. I didn't care. I wanted them all to hear me. "We're leaving right now." "No, Walt, it's not like that. Please, darling, I need to do this. It's just for one night, please try to understand." "Understand? Do you mean understand that you want to break our wedding vows, and on such a night, on our anniversary? Do you realize that you've humiliated me in front of everyone in this place? And now you want to top it off by sleeping with another man? It's ridiculous, no?" At that moment, big old Dennis returned, stood behind Jenny, and put his hands on her shoulders. "Are you ready, darling?" he said, looking at me with the smirk of a victorious hero, ready to enjoy the spoils of his triumph. Jenny took his hand. "I'm sorry, Walt, please try to understand," she said, getting up. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, Jenny, I beg you, please don't do this," I said, like a beaten puppy. "I'm so sorry," she said. I heard some people around us gasp in shock as Jenny turned to leave with her sweetheart. Fine, I shouted, tipping over my chair and standing up abruptly. Then give me back your rings. What? She asked, looking at me. You heard me. If you're going to sleep with another man, I don't think I can stop you, but by God, if you break our wedding vows, wearing the rings I gave you at the altar, I'll be damned. Let's go, Dennis interjected. If he's going to act like a fool, give them to him, and you'll get them back in the morning. Fine, 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 she said, taking them off her finger. Just make sure you put them in a safe place, darling, she shouted, handing me the rings. I clenched them in my fingers and raised my hand above my head. How much am I offered for this beautiful wedding and engagement ring set? I roared to the crowd. $500, I heard someone shout from behind. Walt, what are you doing? Jenny shouted. Well, obviously, it means nothing to you. Maybe someone else can make use of them, someone who truly understands what marriage is. Don't worry, I'll give you half of what I get for them in the divorce, I smirked. It seemed to me that tears glistened in her eyes, but in the dimly lit club, it was hard to say for sure. Let's go, Jenny called Dennis, pulling her by the hand. He's just bluffing. He's not going to ruin your marriage over one night. She seemed reluctant, but turned and walked away with a heavy heart. 600, I heard as they exited the door. A little over 2 hours later, I slid the keycard into the slot of room 28 at the Arlington Hills Days Inn Hotel. I opened the door and looked at the feminine figure dozing on the bed. Her beautiful chest, enclosed in a tiny purple lace bra, rose and fell in a gentle rhythm. My breath caught as I saw her for the first time, and she still had that effect on me. She opened her dark blue eyes and smiled as I closed the door. Did you sell them? Of course, I told her. How much? She asked eagerly. 1,800, I replied. Oh, she said, not bad. What does that mean for us now? I quickly calculated, almost 37 grand, not bad for 3 weeks. Jenny slid off the bed, approached, hugged me, and passionately kissed my lips. She rubbed her lacy bra sensuously against my body, and almost immediately we both felt the desire between us. She purred, someone's feeling playful. Well, it's our anniversary, and after a performance like today's. I let my words hang in the air for a moment. Where's Dennis? I asked. Every time we do this, he gets better and better. He was so good tonight that I even started getting jealous of you too, I said with a slight chuckle. He's in his room. I think he might have a girl with him. Today he was really a bit scared. When we were leaving, a few guys were giving him very hard looks. He thought they would come after him in the parking lot, but they didn't. I hope he's not planning to leave. I would never have gotten so much for the rings if everyone in this place didn't hate him so much. It would be very frustrating to train someone else again. I don't think you should worry, dear. His income is almost $10,000, which is not bad for an unemployed actor. Even if he were working, it's twice as much as he ever made on stage in any theater. I hope so. I also think we've exhausted our hospitality in our hometown, dear. I'm sure everyone already knows that these rings are worthless. Most likely, the Chicago police already have our descriptions, and if they're not all looking for us, I'm sure some of them already started. It was great to come home, but I think it's time for us to have sex. I'll go tell Dennis that we're leaving in the morning, right after breakfast. Don't take too long, darling, she said seductively. It didn't take long. I knocked on Dennis's door 2 rooms down from ours. He only opened it a crack. Jenny was right, there was a girl with him. Everything went well after we left? He asked through the crack. Yep, I got 1,800, I replied. I saw him smile. But I think it's time for us to leave. I'm feeling heat on my neck. We'll meet at the restaurant tomorrow at 9 in the morning. We'll leave right after breakfast. Okay, he replied quietly. You did a great job, I told him. Enjoy tonight. Dennis's smile widened. Oh, you can bet on that. I heard his companion chuckle just before he closed the door. When I returned to our room, Jenny was lying in a seductive pose on the bed. The sexy lingerie she had looked so good in earlier was now absent, and the only thing on her was a wide smile. I undressed in record time and climbed into bed next to the most gorgeous woman I'd ever known and kissed her tenderly, with love and compassion. She purred, what are you going to do with this weapon, my husband? I was already too far gone to speak, but I managed to mumble, it's not a weapon, my dear, it's my instrument of love, and I plan to use it to make love to the most wonderful woman in the world. Oh, I like that, Jenny said. She moaned. 2 more times that night, we reached euphoric bliss. Finally, our bodies exhausted, we embraced each other in a loving embrace. It was a good idea to come back to Chicago for our anniversary, she said. With all our constant travels, I almost forgot what it feels like to be home. I know, me too, I replied softly. Honestly, I thought all these moves were starting to strain our marriage, and I hoped Chicago would help restore some of the initial magic we both felt when we lived here. Was I right? Yes, darling, you were right. Coming home reminded me of how much I love you, she said, reaching out and turning my head for a gentle little kiss. Sweetheart, just before you and Dennis left, I thought I saw real tears in your eyes. You did, she explained quietly. Sometimes when I play my role, it feels so real. Tonight I thought about what it would be like if we actually broke up. It scared me, and I started to cry. That will never happen, my dear. We were meant to be together. She smiled and lovingly looked into my eyes. So, my wonderful husband, where's our next stop in the Port OO? I smiled. I had a truly loving wife. I was thinking about Dakota. With all that shale oil and those lonely guys with nothing to spend their money on, I think we could earn enough to retire, I joked.
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments.